In today's video, we will be reviewing testimony from trial day 26 with Joseph Paul finishing his testimony, Erin Whhiffin, Whhiffin, and Nicholas Garino. Yesterday on the stand, we ended with Trooper Joseph Paul, and he was doing the testing with Karen's SUV in the parking lot, its acceleration and deceleration. Mr. Paul was asked if there were any road conditions that played a factor into this collision, that being Karen hitting John. And he said, quote, "There were no roadway or environmental factors that contributed to this collision," end quote. Now, I don't know why he said that, because the roads were icy and snowy. Finally, we got to cross-examination from Mr. Jackson, and Joseph was questioned about if he had any degrees in mathematics. He said no. If he had any degrees in physics, he said no. If he had any degrees in biomechanics, he said no. And engineering, he said no. If he had any degrees in kinematics, and he said no. Mr. Jackson then asked him if he could explain what kinematics was. He struggled to give an explanation of what it was. And the reason why that's a problem is because he used kinematics to explain how Karen's SUV's wheels were angled and then the speed she was going, thus resulting in the movement and the degree for which John was hit and projected. If you remember me using this description in the last video, I mean, technically I could be giving this description as well. In conclusion, I don't have a degree in any of those particular subjects, but I also am not on the stand claiming this is how this person got killed based off of kinematics. He also explained that he cannot say definitively that resulted in a pedestrian strike. He also agreed with Mr. Jackson that his reasoning and explanation of the events is just his opinion, which is not how Mr. Lowley projected it to be. He tried to act as if this was expert opinions in how John was hit and killed. He was shown the picture of the diagram he himself created to reference back to the testimony he made on Friday questioning for Mr. Lowley, and he explained that he used the direction of the debris field to determine the area of impact of John. Mr. Jackson pointed out that there is debris way over here to the left by the fire hydrant that does not follow his direction of debris, thus moving the area of impact further down the road. And Trooper Paul said, no, it doesn't change the area of impact because he doesn't know exactly where John was actually hit. Also using this diagram, he was asked to tell the court the distance of John's final resting place, and he said about 30 feet. Now, this would indicate that John was hit and flew 30 feet. However, Trooper Paul said that he didn't necessarily fly there, he would have rolled. But Mr. Jackson pointed out that he had just stated that there was no evidence that he had rolled. You could see that Mr. Jackson knew he had him by the smile in his face. So let's take a look at that footage.
Forward and to the left, to the front yard, to his final place of rest.
Yes.
So your expert testimony is that John O'Keefe was hit with the SUV and flew 30 feet.
Projected, I don't say he flew all the way there. He was projected in that way. He got pushed forward in that direction.
Which, he was rendered incapacitated, landed there, that's sort of fly there, right? Didn't walk there.
I mean, would you definitely fly literally off the ground the whole entire time, or?
Well, you tell me, you're the expert.
I mean, when we say projected, we mean he gets projected, and they usually have a landing phase, and they land, and then they either roll or tumble to final rest.
Okay, how far do you think he landed? How far was it until he landed of that 30 feet?
I don't know. There's no indication of where his exact landing spot was.
Right. Is there any evidence whatsoever that he landed and rolled?
And there was no evidence that he landed or rolled. Or no, rolled.
According to you, the evidence that you have in front of you is that you get hit, fly 30 feet, land where he ended up at his final rest, right?
Objection. Sustained. Ask it differently.
Based on your expert opinion, you believe that he was projected through the air to his final rest place.
That's not what I'm saying.
But you said there's no evidence that he rolled.
And there's no evidence that he flew through the air either.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Is there evidence that maybe he was drugged there? Maybe. Maybe that's how the phone came out of his pocket. Maybe that's how the shoe came off. At this point, we still have no idea. And we are at day 20. What are we at? Day 26? And we are at day 26. He was also asked if he had an idea or theory of how John's phone ended up under his body. And Mr. Paul said he doesn't know. And he didn't have any ideas or theories of how it ended up there. He said he was told to reconstruct the scene of the incident, but doesn't remember who exactly told him that it was a Boston police officer who was struck by a vehicle that was traveling in reverse. So this wasn't information he then concluded after his investigation. This was information he was given and told, basically, here's this information, figure out how this happened. He said it was just multiple people giving him information. To which Mr. Jackson questioned him about confirmation bias, and he wasn't really sure what that was. So Mr. Jackson explained. So for those who are watching that don't know, it's when you develop a conclusion and then you try to find evidence to fit that conclusion. You aren't going, here is evidence, what does this result in? You just go, okay, here's this. Now I got to find all the ways that can make this possible. So with him being told John was hit by a vehicle, there's part information being fed. Going in reverse, there's more information being fed. So there he has his conclusion, and he would then be investigating this scene and setting up all these diagrams and everything else to conclude this. And in his analysis, he actually said he didn't know John's body weight, and John actually weighed 277 pounds. And you would need to know the size of the vehicle's weight and the size of the object it's hitting in order to conclude how this object was projected. So since he didn't know the weight of John or the weight of the car, there was no way for him to accurately figure this out. Now, did he not have that available to him? Of course he had that available to him, but that just wasn't what he used to come to these conclusions. And he said that so he can't get the answer to that information or using that information because John was sideswiped. And apparently when you're sideswiped, all of the mathematics change. He also held his arm to show where he believed John was hit based off of the injuries and John's arm, and further explaining that when his arm or shoulder area was hit, it spun or rotated him and projected him. Mr. Paul also believes that when he was hit, that's when the smooth part or the non-broken tail light was shattered, and then John stayed with the vehicle long enough for it to scratch up his arm. However, there are no bruises on John's shoulders, his ribs, his torso, or his back, or any broken bones or fractures that projected a 277-pound male to indicate that he was hit by a vehicle. He also explained that John was holding the glass in his hand, and so when he got hit, the glass moved forward, dented the car. Did he do any kind of pressure test to see if the glass would be able to dent metal? Didn't do any tests for that either. That's how he explains how the dent got there. And he also explained that there is no way to date a dent. So who knows where it came from, but this is his theory on what happened. That was the end to Mr. Jackson's questioning. It was Lowley's turn to redirect, and I cringed because I knew I would be going back to hearing Mr. Lowley's annoying throat clear, and he did not disappoint.
That's triggering event.
Back to the key cycle picture. They used the key cycle chart to explain Karen's direction of travel from 34 Fairview back to John's house that night. So this is going to go into little detail, and I'm going to make it as simple as possible to follow because it was not simple to follow watching the trial.
If you want to talk about key cycles, key cycles. You want to talk about ignition cycles, it's ignition cycles when the vehicle gets turned on. A key cycle does not mean to be turned on.
But every single ignition cycle includes a key cycle. You can't have an ignition cycle without a key cycle, right?
Well, if you want to talk about it, just use the key cycles or ignition cycles. I'm trying to make sure this gets out. I'm trying to make sure that this gets put out the correct way.
Every ignition cycle includes a key cycle, correct?
In a sense.
By definition, it has to, right?
It doesn't have to. They record multiple different ways.
You can have an ignition cycle without a key cycle.
I don't know how it recorded, but it could happen.
So I will break this down the best I can for you guys. So let's do an example of what he's talking about. Here you have your first push, and that powers the vehicle. You press it off quickly, again, that shuts off the power. Now if we go all the way from power on, again to start of a vehicle, and then off, that would be your ignition cycle. I'm going to try to break this chart down so it can simplify what is happening here, what Trooper Paul was trying to show here. So this is his key cycle chart. As you just saw the video, what a key cycle is, it's when the car gets the power and gets shut back off. Ignition cycle is when the car actually starts and then shut off. Why he only provided us a chart for key cycles, I don't know. Well, because he also included the odometer mileage, what it traveled during these key cycles, which by definition cannot happen because a key cycle is only the vehicle powering on and powering off. But this is what he gave us. Okay, so looking at his chart here, at his key cycle chart, he has this section here, which is everything here with this red arrow all the way down to here. And this is 01164. What do these numbers mean? This is the number the car records every time the car is turned on. This is technically the 1164th time Karen's SUV has been started. And that's when he did all his testing here at the police station. If we move backwards, according to him, 01163 is missing. He said he doesn't know why it's missing, but it's just not there. Okay, so let's move on in reverse. He's saying 01162 is the time Karen operated her vehicle to hit John. And here he has it shifting into reverse. The accelerated pedal's opening angle in medium is higher immediately after shifting into reverse. So this is what he's saying when this happened. Now let's go to some charts I made here. As we were just seeing, he has the vehicle in his possession at 01164 and he is testing it. So if we were going to go to 01163, that's missing. And he was asked if he knew that Karen's vehicle had been taken into custody and put onto a tow truck and then unloaded off the tow truck and put into the Sally Port. And he said no, he didn't know that. So he's working off the information he was given by these other officers. So he was told, you got to figure out when she hit John. So he went in reverse figuring that out. So lacking the information of her vehicle being put onto a tow truck and then removed off, we're missing stuff here. And why is that a problem? Because if we go in reverse on his timeline, this 01162 would be Karen leaving the bar, headed over to 34 Fairview, hitting John, and then going on to John's house. These numbers go in progressive order. And if we break this down, I'm just going to read these ends, the 100 instead of the 1,000. So he has the vehicle here at 164. He's testing it. Before that would be 163, the SUV being driven off of the tow truck and put here into the Sally Port. 162 should be Karen's vehicle being driven onto the tow truck. 161 should be Karen driving from John's house to her parents' house. Then 160 would then be Karen driving from John's house, looking for John all over the city, driving off to the McCabe home, and then arriving back to John's house. 159 would then be Karen driving from Waterfall Bar to drop off John at 34 Fairview, then on to John's house. If things were being recorded correctly, this is the sequence of events. This is the sequence of events he gives us. We're missing quite a bit of data off of this. 162, the vehicle should have been getting driven off of the tow truck. Do you see that? That's a problem because here at 161, technically the vehicle would already be in the police custody because it would be getting driven on to the truck and it would then be in Michael Proctor's custody at this point. And Mr. Jackson pointed this out, and Trooper Paul said that it's best not to look at the key cycle numbers. It's best to look at the odometer miles because there's the mileage and that's how much it's driven. Doesn't matter when it was turned on or off. Okay, so then let's go with that, Trooper Paul. So we get this number here. We get when he started his testing at 12,665 miles, and we subtract it to 12,629, and that gives us a 36 miles difference here. According to him, the vehicle was driven 36 miles, which in his eyes would be her driving from the bar over to 34 Fairview onto John's house and then eventually getting the vehicle taken into police custody where he started his testing. Now, what does that even matter? Well, it matters because they're claiming Karen pulled up here to 34 Fairview, and as Jennifer McCabe said multiple times,